The first transmission arrived on a cold December night, detected by a lonely satellite drifting on the outskirts of the solar system. At first, the signal was dismissed as cosmic noise, just another burst of meaningless radiation from the depths of space. But as the days passed, the signal persisted, growing stronger, more deliberate. At the Charleston Observatory, nestled deep in the Colorado mountains, Dr. Evelyn Carter and her team became the first to recognize the pattern hidden within the interference. The signal wasn't random. It wasn't natural. It was rhythmic, structured, intelligent. A chilling realization settled over them: someone, or something, was trying to communicate. Excitement quickly turned to unease as they decoded the first fragment. It wasn't mathematical sequences or greetings in universal physics. It was voices. Warped, distorted, and layered upon each other like a chorus of lost souls. Some whispered. Others screamed. And then, in perfect English, a single phrase broke through the noise: "You found us. Now we see you." The observatory's systems flickered. Static filled the air. Outside, the night seemed darker than it should be, shadows stretching unnaturally beneath the glow of the satellite dishes. Over the next few weeks, things began to change. Evelyn's colleagues complained of nightmares, visions of endless black voids filled with writhing, shifting shapes. One researcher clawed at his own skin, muttering about something crawling beneath the surface of reality. Another was found staring at the night sky, his eyes wide, whispering, "They're already here." Then, one by one, they started disappearing. Evelyn was the last to remain. The signal had changed, pulsing with an eerie, insistent rhythm. It no longer asked to be heard. It demanded. As she stared at the data on her flickering screen, she noticed something horrifying. The signal wasn't coming from a distant exoplanet anymore. It was coming from inside the observatory. And something was knocking at the door. The first transmission came unexpectedly, buried within the usual cosmic noise that radio astronomers filtered through every day. It was late at night at the Charleston Observatory, and the lead scientist, Dr. Evelyn Carter, was running routine scans of deep space signals, mapping the background radiation of the universe. At first, the anomaly seemed insignificant, just a faint blip, an irregular pulse among the static. Signals like these were common, often attributed to distant quasars, pulsars, or cosmic rays interfering with radio telescopes. But then it happened again. And again. The pulse was rhythmic, repeating at precise intervals, far too structured to be a natural cosmic phenomenon. Evelyn adjusted the telescope's frequency, refining the data, isolating the source. The signal was coming from an exoplanet 1 orbiting a red dwarf star nearly 150 light-years away. That in itself was unsettling. The star system in question was considered unremarkable, no known planetary formations deemed habitable, no scientific significance at all. Yet, here was a transmission originating from its depths, a whisper carried across the void. As the team gathered to analyze the data, a sense of unease settled over them. The signal wasn't just rhythmic, it was deliberate. Within the pulses, there were fluctuations, hidden variations in amplitude and frequency. It wasn't a steady beacon like a pulsar. It had complexity. Purpose. The idea that it could be of artificial origin sent an electric thrill through the observatory. Could this be proof of extraterrestrial intelligence? Excitement quickly turned to something more cautious. The team had protocols for this, steps in place to verify signals and rule out terrestrial interference. They ran cross-checks with other observatories, confirming that the signal was real, not an artifact of their own equipment. Every scan led to the same conclusion: The transmission was authentic, and it was coming from deep space. Then they noticed something odd. As they visualized the waveforms, mapping the signal's patterns, they detected subtle distortions, ghostly echoes within the frequency, like faint voices hidden beneath the primary pulse. The more they filtered and refined the signal, the more disturbing it became. There were layers upon layers of sound buried inside, some too faint to be heard, others distorted beyond recognition. And then came the breakthrough. After hours of decryption, running advanced signal processing algorithms, one of the researchers managed to isolate a single fragment, a short sequence of sound that had been masked beneath the radio waves. What played through the speakers chilled them to the bone. A voice. Garbled, distant, but undeniably human. At first, they thought it might be a mistake, an old Earth signal bouncing back after decades of travel. But no, that was impossible. The delay was all wrong, the signal too precise, too localized. Then the voice spoke again, clearer this time, its tone hollow and mechanical. "You found us. Now we see you." Evelyn felt her breath hitch. It wasn't just a signal. It was an answer. The initial shock of hearing the voice sent a wave of silence through the observatory. Dr. Evelyn Carter and her team sat frozen, the distorted words still echoing in their ears. A message. A direct response. But from who or what? The signal wasn't just random noise or an old transmission bouncing through space. It was a communication. They played the audio over and over, analyzing the waveform, trying to understand its origin. The voice had an unnatural quality, like a recording played too many times, stretched and warped in ways that didn't seem possible. It wasn't just speaking, it was layered. Beneath the main voice, there were other sounds, too faint to be deciphered. Some sounded like whispers. Others, like distant, echoing screams. Despite the growing unease, the team was driven by scientific curiosity. If this was a message from extraterrestrial intelligence, it could be the most significant discovery in human history. They worked tirelessly, feeding the signal into advanced decoding software, stripping away interference, isolating patterns. What they found was even more unsettling. The signal wasn't just a single transmission. It was changing. Adapting. Every time they analyzed a new portion, the frequency shifted slightly, almost as if it knew it was being watched. One of the junior researchers, Dr. Malik Roshan, noted something terrifying. When they first detected the transmission, it had repeated at steady intervals. Now, after hours of listening, the pattern had altered, as though responding to their efforts. And then they found the numbers. Hidden within the fluctuations of the signal were sequences of numbers that, when arranged, formed coordinates. The coordinates pointed to a location in deep space, near the source of the transmission, but there was something familiar about them. Evelyn ran them through the database, cross-referencing known celestial bodies, expecting them to lead to an unexplored star system. Instead, they pointed back at Earth. No one spoke for several moments. It wasn't possible. How could an unknown signal from 150 light-years away contain Earth's exact coordinates? Some suggested it was an anomaly, an error in the calculations, but deep down, they all knew that wasn't true. The numbers were precise. Intentional. Then, just as they were about to process the next batch of data, the lights flickered. The observatory's equipment let out a shrill burst of static, monitors glitched, screens filling with unreadable symbols. It lasted only a few seconds before everything returned to normal, but it left behind an eerie sense of something watching. That night, Evelyn had her first nightmare. She dreamed of a vast, endless darkness, a void deeper than space itself. In it, there were shadows, tall, distorted figures, shifting just beyond the edge of sight. She couldn't see their faces, but she felt their presence, pressing against the walls of her mind. And in the dream, a voice whispered directly into her ear. "Keep listening." The disappearances began slowly, almost unnoticeably at first. It started with small things: researchers calling in sick, claiming exhaustion, migraines, or an uneasy feeling they couldn't quite explain. Some reported hearing static even when no equipment was running, an ever-present hum that seemed to follow them home. Others spoke of strange dreams, visions of deep space, of something vast and unknowable watching them from the abyss. Dr. Evelyn Carter tried to keep the team focused, but there was a growing sense of paranoia. The signal had become more than just an anomaly, it had become an obsession. The more they listened, the more it seemed to listen back. The frequency shifts, the embedded voices, the chilling coordinates pointing to Earth, it all felt like a puzzle, and they were desperate to solve it. But then, one by one, the researchers began to vanish. Dr. Malik Roshan was the first. He had been working late, studying the newest variations in the transmission, when the security cameras in the observatory flickered. The footage showed him sitting at his desk, staring at the computer screen. Then, without warning, the camera feed distorted, lines of static racing across the monitor. When it cleared, his chair was empty. His laptop was still open, his coffee still steaming. But Malik was gone. They searched the entire facility. No footprints leading away, no signs of forced entry, no evidence he had even left the room. It was as if he had simply blinked out of existence. Then, the next night, Dr. Lillian Moore disappeared. She had been acting strangely for days, muttering under her breath, constantly glancing over her shoulder. When asked what was wrong, she only gave cryptic responses. "It's inside the signal. We were never supposed to hear it." Her disappearance was even stranger than Malik's. Her bed was untouched, her car still in the parking lot, but her research journal was open to a single page, where she had scrawled the words, "They know we're listening." By the end of the week, 3 more researchers were gone. No traces, no explanations. Panic set in. Some of the remaining team members refused to work, claiming they could hear whispers coming from the radio equipment even when it was turned off. A few packed their things and left, too afraid to continue. Evelyn wanted to leave too, every instinct in her body screamed at her to run. But she couldn't. She needed to understand. Then, in the dead of night, she received a call from one of the missing researchers, Malik. His voice was barely audible, drowned in layers of static, but she could make out 4 trembling words. It opened the door. The call cut off. The moment she put the phone down, the observatory's power flickered. The signal, once a distant transmission from deep space, now filled the entire building. Every monitor displayed a single phrase in glowing, alien symbols. And then, the knocking started. Evelyn's hands trembled as she stared at the glowing symbols on the monitors. The entire observatory was bathed in the cold light of the signal, pulsating like a heartbeat. The air felt heavy, charged with an unnatural energy, and beneath it all, the rhythmic knocking continued, slow, deliberate, coming from the main entrance. No one was supposed to be out there. The remaining researchers huddled together, their fear palpable. Dr. James Holloway, the last of Evelyn's senior colleagues, tried to rationalize it. "It's just the wind," he whispered, though his voice lacked conviction. But Evelyn knew better. The wind didn't knock in perfect rhythm. The wind didn't wait between knocks, as if expecting an answer. She moved toward the security monitors, heart hammering in her chest. The camera feed flickered, distorting into static before stabilizing. What she saw made her breath hitch. The front entrance was empty. And yet, the knocking continued. Evelyn gritted her teeth and turned to her team. "We don't open that door. No matter what." The knocking stopped. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then the computers flickered, screens flooding with lines of incomprehensible data. The speakers crackled, a deep, guttural noise bleeding through the system. It wasn't static anymore. It was a voice. But it wasn't speaking in words. It was an imitation, fragmented echoes of the missing researchers' voices, layered on top of one another. "Evelyn! Evelyn! Help!" It opened. It opened the door. James staggered backward, his face pale. "That's Malik. And Lillian." Evelyn's blood ran cold. She had heard their voices before, but not like this. These weren't messages. They were playbacks, warped and distorted, twisted into something else. Then the main doors unlocked on their own. A gust of freezing air rushed inside, carrying the scent of something metallic and rotten. The lights flickered violently. In the chaos, Evelyn's eyes darted toward the entrance, and for a split second, she saw something. A figure stood just beyond the threshold. It was human-shaped, but wrong, its form shifting, flickering like a corrupted hologram. It had no face, only a smooth, reflective void where features should have been. Its limbs twitched, elongating and retracting as though struggling to maintain a stable form. And worst of all, it knew they were watching. James let out a strangled gasp, and the thing snapped its head toward the camera, moving faster than anything humanly possible. The security feed cut to black. The emergency sirens blared, the facility's automatic lockdown sequence activating. Doors sealed, backup generators hummed to life. But Evelyn knew this wasn't a defense. It was a tomb. The observatory was no longer just receiving a signal. The signal had let something through. And now, it was inside. The final transmission from the Charleston Observatory was a garbled mess of static, distorted voices, and something far worse, something beneath the noise, layered so deeply it made the signal itself feel alive. Emergency responders arrived at the facility the following morning, finding the power flickering erratically, every computer locked in a loop, displaying the same phrase over and over. "We see you." But the research team was gone. Every single one of them. The security footage was corrupted, filled with erratic distortions and frames that didn't make sense, shapes that flickered too quickly, movements that defied physics. The last clear recording showed Dr. Evelyn Carter staring at the main control panel, her eyes wide, unblinking, her lips barely moving. The timestamp showed that this footage should have lasted 30 seconds. Instead, it stretched out over 20 full minutes of silent, flickering horror. Then, the cameras all cut to black. There were no bodies. No signs of struggle. Every workstation was exactly as they had left it, coffee still warm in some of the mugs. It was as if they had all simply vanished. But then, there was the signal. Despite the observatory being shut down, the signal remained active, now stronger than ever. It no longer pulsed from the distant exoplanet, it was originating from inside the facility. More disturbingly, in the hours following the event, astronomers across the globe began detecting the same frequency, echoing across different observatories, from different points in space. It was spreading. Government agencies intervened, confiscating all remaining data, scrubbing every record, labeling the incident as an unexplained technical failure. The facility was quietly shut down, its existence erased from official archives. But whispers persisted. Scientists who had worked with Evelyn swore they still heard strange interference in their radio equipment, brief bursts of sound that weren't supposed to be there. Some said they heard voices in the static. Others claimed they saw flickering shapes in the darkness, just at the edge of their vision. And then, months later, the missing researchers returned. They reappeared one by one, found wandering in remote locations across the world: an abandoned ship in the Pacific, a frozen tundra in Siberia, an empty highway in Nevada. Their clothes were the same as the night they disappeared, untouched by time, but their eyes were different. They didn't speak. They didn't respond to their names. Their bodies were intact, but something inside them was wrong. Evelyn was the last to be found. She was standing on a hill outside the ruined observatory, gazing up at the night sky. When authorities approached, she finally spoke for the first time since returning. "It's not a signal anymore." Her voice was hollow, layered, like multiple voices speaking at once. "It's a doorway." Then, without another word, she smiled and vanished again.